We get utterly terrified by the best horror games. We are dropped into the most horrific environments without a flashlight, a clue as to why the walls are bleeding, or, you know, that woman with the cool hat is, like, 10 feet tall. They instill fear in us, pit us against monsters, and pit us against one another. This list of the best horror games scours the entire landscape of the genre, from indie gems to AAA masterpieces. From time-tested classic series to fresh newcomers, we've got you covered. 10. Dead Space. If Resident Evil is the king of survival action horror, Dead Space aimed to be the pretender, combining Capcom's early Dread and later over-the-shoulder shooting into one gory package. The 2008 release, which borrowed from Alien and other sci-fi classics, cast players in the role of Isaac Clarke, an engineer trapped on a derelict spacecraft. Soon after, Isaac discovers that the ship isn't as empty as it appears and that a strange alien artifact has transformed everyone on board into hideous, flesh-eating creatures, each more horrific than the last. By limiting the player, Dead Space creates a terrifying experience. Isaac is low on ammo, has little idea what's going on in the constantly shifting story, and is most vulnerable to what he can't see. Much of the disturbing atmosphere is built on what you hear, and the incredible sound design employs audio to create an entire deadly world around Isaac. 9. SOMA. SOMA has problems primarily in the clumsy stealth section, but it also has one of the most unpleasantly disturbing stories on the list. To explain why would ruin it, but this terrifyingly plays with ideas of consciousness and what makes you few. When you're not exploring Pathos 2's rusted, decaying undersea base, you're dabbling with some pretty heavy metaphysical concepts that will give you nightmares. This is a world full of broken machines, glitching human consciousnesses, and slimy growths that expand and morph into something terrible the longer you explore it. The undersea and biotech elements make a BioShock comparison difficult to avoid, but while there are similarities, particularly man's arrogance and science taken too far, this is far more unpleasant and ethically shocking. With the new safe mode, you can now play it just for the story, finishing it and seeing if you can sleep afterward. It is available on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. 8. Outlast. Outlast takes you on a first-person journey through a setting that no one would willingly visit in real life, an old asylum that appears abandoned but is strangely very active. Late at night. It's in the mountains. I'm miles away from help. Who would do that? The setup is perfect horror fodder on its own, but this plays out similarly to Found Footage, the game, with clever use of a video camera's night vision mode to see in the dark. It also creates a grainy, glowing green view that is a little too close to reality. It's one part exploration and two parts cowering behind a table while following shadowy, wheezing shapes in the black distance through a viewfinder. It is available on PS4, Xbox One, PC, and Nintendo Switch. 7. Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill as a franchise has some of the most terrifying enemies and situations in gaming history, but Silent Hill 2 is the series' most enduring horror. This PS2 classic turns our worst fears into flesh, revealing that there is no greater evil than our own imagination. Though he will encounter iconic creatures such as the nurses and Pyramid Head, protagonist James Sunderland is far more threatened by his own demons. And Silent Hill's deserted town brings them all to the surface. James has returned to Silent Hill to respond to a letter that appears to be from his deceased wife, but all he finds are reminders of his own grief and guilt over her death. Every corner of town is home to a new horror, but James must overcome his fears if he is to learn what is going on. You and he will be disappointed by what he discovers beyond them. Silent Hill 2 isn't just a horror game worth playing, it's also a story worth listening to, parsing, and gawping at. The further you go, the worse it becomes. It is available on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. 6. The Walking Dead, Saints and Sinners. The only reason this isn't our top horror game overall is that it's in VR, which obviously limits the number of people who can play it. However, if you can get your hands on a VR headset, this is a must-have horror game. It's one of the best playable interpretations of the source material ever made, from swinging axes or stabbing screwdrivers into zombie heads to cautiously exploring rotting houses, terrified of every corner. There's also a semi-open world in which you can explore and revisit hubs, crisscrossing locations in search of valuable resources, enemies, and allies to assist you. It also has nothing to do with the comics or TV shows other than the zombies, so you don't have to be a fan to enjoy it. It is available on PS4 and PC. 5. Resident Evil 2 Remake. It's almost unfathomable that Resident Evil 2 is back on the best horror games list more than 20 years after its original PS1 release. But then there's Resident Evil 2 Remake, a remake of the original game from the ground up that honors the past while building a future for the franchise with a game nearly 2 decades old. It's a success and ranks high on this list because of how well it blends old and new. It's an exact recreation of Leon and Claire's original attempts to flee a zombie-infested raccoon city, complete with all the monsters, set pieces, and story beats you remember. But it's also designed with today's horror sensibilities in mind, combining almost beautiful levels of gore with tight gunplay, clever puzzles, and some stunning levels. This is just as important today as the original game was back then. It is available on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. 4. P.T. You'd be disappointed if you brought together the world's most eccentric game auteur and one of its greatest film monster creators and they didn't create one of the oddest, most horrifying games ever released. Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro's playable teaser for Silent Hills places you in a single, infinitely looping hallway and proceeds to terrify you in 1,000 different ways. This is no idle boast. One member of the game's Radar Plus team was unable to play this game with the lights turned off and had to turn the sound down to tolerate it. There are times when you are in danger, but they are few and far between. The true terror stems from the unknown. What's around the next corner? Is it better to have a new nightmare or nothing at all? Your imagination fills in the blanks, terrifying you more than any jump scare or creepy noise could. Add in an underlying story of domestic terror that would make any Silent Hill fan nostalgic, and you've got the world's shortest horror masterpiece in your hands. 3. Alien, Isolation. Countless games have been inspired by Alien franchise elements, whether it's James Cameron's Space Marines, Ellen Ripley's bravery, or the chilling power of silence in a soundtrack. Despite this, Alien, Isolation may be the series' most successful video game. It takes the gut-wrenching fear instilled by the original film's lone xenomorph and expands it into a lengthy game. Isolation's tense survival gameplay keeps the heart racing for hours on end. You play Amanda, Ripley's daughter, who searches a derelict space station for her mother, only to encounter the same beast she fought. You're constantly on the lookout for your alien hunter's cinematic AI. This includes holding your breath as you try to avoid detection or screaming in terror when you fail to reach safety. The game's atmosphere is impressive enough, but it deserves extra credit for resurrecting the xenomorph, a movie monster that has become cliché due to overexposure, and making it terrifying once more. It is available on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. 2. Layers of Fear. Most video games can make you jump and scream, but only a few can make you doubt yourself in real life. Layers of Fear appears to be very familiar at first as you explore a spooky, creepy, and cavernously empty house. As you play an unnamed artist returning home, the gothic story unfolds slowly. However, it soon becomes clear that the painter has succumbed to madness, which manifests itself in the untrustworthy narration of the physical world. Doors vanish and corridors warp out of shape just in front of you. The game rearranges itself in such a way to recreate the main character's insanity that you'll find yourself questioning everything after only a few hours. Last time you looked, was that desk on that side of the room? Are you certain? Add to that the nature of the protagonist's illness, an obsessional painting made from less than savory materials, and you've got one of the best horror games ever made. It is available on PS4, Xbox One, PC, and Nintendo Switch. On the number first spot we have Resident Evil 7. It could have been a disaster, a clumsy, forced update to a beloved series that left fans yearning for Resident Evil SX's bombastic nonsense. But Resi 7 is a triumph, cleverly drawing inspiration from the best horror films of the last 20 years and seamlessly blending all that edgy new into a recognizable, modern reinvention of the series. The central plot is fantastic, the mysteries are cleverly hidden, and your tormentors, the Bakers, are brilliantly subversive. Switching to first-person mode adds some VR possibilities, but also makes the horror feel uncomfortably close, grueling, compelling stuff in a setting you'll remember long after you've explored it up close. The cleverest trick, however, is how Resi it all feels. The safe rooms provide the same unsettling respite, ammo is scarce, and boss fights provide the right mix of terror and glowing, oozing bits to shoot. It's a tight, smart horror game that's far better than most fans expected. It's not the scariest or most subtle game on the list, but it's a brilliant and terrifying rebirth. This wraps up our list of the top 10 best horror games. If you liked the video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. It would mean the world to me.